What if everything you thought you knew about the royal racism scandal was a lie? What if the most explosive accusation ever launched at the British monarchy wasn't just a misunderstanding, a cultural clash, or even a poorly handled conversation, but something far more calculated and deliberate? That's exactly what Piers Morgan claims to have uncovered. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Yes, that Piers Morgan. The man many dismissed, mocked, and canceled for questioning Meghan Markle's integrity. The same man who stormed off the set of Good Morning Britain and lost his job for saying he didn't believe a word she said during her now iconic interview with Oprah Winfrey. The same man who became the face of opposition to the Sussexes, while most of the world clutched their pearls in horror at the palace's supposed cruelty. But now, after 2 years of digging, cross-referencing private emails, tracking whistleblowers, and examining internal palace communications, Piers Morgan is back, louder than ever, and armed with what he calls the receipts that will blow this story wide open. This time, it isn't just opinion. It's evidence. You remember the moment, don't you? March 7th, 2021. Meghan Markle sat down with Oprah under the California sun in a carefully curated garden filled with symbolism and serenity. She was wearing black, elegant, mournful, intentional. Harry sat beside her, equal parts supportive and uneasy. Then she dropped the bomb. There were concerns, she said, about how dark her unborn child's skin might be. She didn't say who said it. She wouldn't say when. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The world gasped. Headlines exploded. The British monarchy, a 1,000-year-old institution, was, in an instant, framed as a den of racism. Social media burned with hashtags. Hollywood stars rushed to post black squares. Politicians voiced outrage. Even President Biden's press secretary was asked about it. And back in the UK, the palace was silent, blindsided. And somewhere in the noise, Piers Morgan said what many didn't dare. I don't believe her. That 5-word phrase detonated like a nuclear bomb. Within hours, petitions called for his resignation. Twitter deemed him unfit for television. ITV executives demanded an apology. But Piers refused to back down. He walked off the set, out of his job, and into the wilderness, shunned, slandered, and smeared as a bitter old man clinging to outdated views. But what if he was right? What if Meghan Markle's most damaging claim, the one that shattered public trust in the royals and rebranded the monarchy for an entire generation, wasn't entirely truthful? Or worse, what if it was never meant to be? Over the past 2 years, new voices have come forward. Former palace aides, PR executives, anonymous insiders, and documents, emails, texts, internal memos, began surfacing, not through official channels, but quietly, discreetly, and sometimes anonymously. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs became questions. And Piers Morgan, fueled by the belief that he had been unjustly condemned, began connecting the dots. What he found, he says, is a tangled web of contradictions, carefully curated narratives, and shocking cover-ups, both inside and outside the palace. He alleges that Meghan's story was not only inconsistent, but strategically altered before the Oprah interview, that it was rehearsed, coordinated, and perhaps even tested on select media consultants before going public. And more explosively, that people within the palace knew it was false, knew it wasn't how the conversation actually happened, but they let it slide. Why? To protect the Queen's image? To avoid inflaming racial tensions? Or because exposing the lie would trigger a backlash so severe it could burn the monarchy to the ground? These are the questions now facing the British public as Piers steps forward with what he claims are the receipts to back it all up. Imagine being told that the very words which upended your country's image across the globe, the words that sent protesters into the streets, inspired op-eds from global leaders, and pushed race relations into a boiling point, may have been fabricated or at least twisted beyond recognition. Would you want to know? Or would you rather keep believing the fairy tale? This exposé isn't just about Meghan Markle. It's about a system that allowed a single accusation, unverified and unexplained, to shake the foundations of the British monarchy without resistance. It's about a media machine that anointed her as a symbol of progress without questioning her motives. And it's about a nation that may have been emotionally manipulated on a global scale. Why didn't Buckingham Palace fight back? Why didn't the Queen or Prince Charles name the person who was allegedly misquoted? Why did Harry stay silent during the fallout? And what has he said behind closed doors? And most crucially, what role did Piers Morgan really play in this saga? You see, this isn't the story of a disgraced journalist lashing out. This is the story of a man who was thrown into the fire, only to emerge, not burned, but emboldened. Now, armed with insider testimony, confidential messages, and shocking transcripts, Piers is ready to expose not just Meghan Markle's claims, but the palace's quiet complicity in allowing the lie to live. In the UK, it isn't ready. Because if what Piers reveals is true, if even a fraction of it holds up under scrutiny, then we aren't just looking at a media scandal or a royal feud. We're staring down a national reckoning. Piers says he has the email from the palace aide who first documented the infamous conversation Meghan referenced. He says he's read WhatsApp exchanges between Meghan and her former PR staff, outlining a strategy to paint herself as a victim of institutional racism. He says there's an unaired portion of the Oprah interview that was deliberately cut. A portion where Meghan stumbled over key facts, contradicted herself, and then asked for that segment to be removed. And he says there's a voice recording, not of the racism conversation itself, that, by all accounts, was never recorded, but of a private phone call between Meghan and a former close friend just days after the interview, where she allegedly laughs about how well it went. He claims the tape exists, that it's been authenticated, and that it's now in the hands of lawyers, advisors, and a media network ready to blow the lid off the cover-up. Still think this is just about gossip? Piers isn't holding back. Not this time. He's been called every name in the book. Misogynist, racist, jealous, bitter. But he says he doesn't care anymore. What matters now is truth. And the truth, he says, is far uglier than any tabloid headline. He's naming names. He's exposing handlers. He's dragging conversations out from behind closed doors and shining a light on the manipulation, strategy, and cold calculation that turned a private royal family dispute into an international race war. And if he's telling the truth, then every headline you read, every tear you cried, every piece of sympathy you gave, it might have been for nothing. But before we get to the emails, the texts, the recordings, before we show you the person inside Buckingham Palace who allegedly knew Meghan's story was false and chose to stay silent, we need to understand one thing. Why did Piers Morgan risk everything for this? What drove him to walk away from his career, his platform, and his reputation? What exactly did he discover in the weeks after the Oprah interview that changed his mind and his life forever? It started with one message, a private, anonymous email, just one sentence long, and it read, "She lied. I have proof." But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Why would a man throw away his entire career just to call someone a liar? That's what millions were asking in March 2021 when Piers Morgan stormed off the Good Morning Britain set, live, on air, after co-host Alex Beresford challenged him on his relentless criticism of Meghan Markle. In that now infamous exchange, the air was electric with fury. Piers didn't just walk away from a conversation. He walked away from a legacy. And yet, he didn't hesitate. Not for a second. But why? Was it pride? Ego? A grudge from when Meghan supposedly ghosted him after she met Prince Harry? Or was it something else, something far more personal? The truth is, Piers Morgan wasn't just lashing out. He was unraveling. Not because of Meghan, but because he knew something, and no one wanted to hear it. You see, what most people don't know is what happened before the broadcast. In the hours leading up to that dramatic walk-off, Piers had received a message, a cryptic email that would mark the beginning of his own personal investigation. One line, anonymous, chilling, and impossible to ignore. "She lied. I have proof." At first, he thought it was a prank. Another angry royalist? A bitter ex-staffer trying to smear Meghan? Maybe even a troll hoping to stir the pot? But as he sat in his dressing room, rereading the message, something didn't feel like noise. It felt deliberate. Then came the second message, just 2 hours before he went on air. Same sender. Different tone. "You've been right all along. They're hiding it. She knows. He knows. But the palace won't touch it." That's when something snapped in Piers. Because while the world was losing its collective mind over Meghan's revelations to Oprah, racism, neglect, suicidal ideation. Piers was stewing with a different kind of outrage. Not because of her race, not because of her fame, but because, to him, it didn't add up. The narrative, the timeline, the selective wording, it all felt too polished. He had seen this before. In politics, in celebrity culture, carefully crafted messaging, deployed for maximum public impact. And Meghan's performance, yes, he called it a performance, was pitch perfect. But behind that polish, he smelled something rotten. So, when Alex Beresford tried to corner him live on air, demanding he apologize to Meghan, demanding he admit he was wrong, Piers didn't just feel attacked, he felt betrayed. Betrayed by a system that rewarded silence. Betrayed by a network more concerned about optics than truth. And he walked, not because he lost the argument, but because he refused to be part of what he believed was a machine built on lies. It wasn't long before the backlash came. Within minutes, hashtags were trending globally. Hashtag fire Piers Morgan. Hashtag believe black women. Hashtag racist Piers. Over 50,000 complaints flooded Ofcom. Meghan herself reportedly filed a formal complaint to ITV about his harmful comments. For most, that would be the end. Career over. Reputation in tatters. But for Piers Morgan, it was just beginning. Because those 2 emails? They weren't spam. They were a doorway. In the weeks that followed his resignation, Piers disappeared from the public eye. At least on TV. But behind the scenes, he was working the phones, calling contacts, digging deep, and most of all, replying to that anonymous sender. They didn't reveal their identity. Not at first. But they gave him something even more valuable, direction. Look at the comms log from January 2020. One message read. Cross-reference it with the staff rota at Frogmore. Another message, days later. The conversation Meghan referenced never happened the way she said. There's no record of it. And no one remembers it like that. And then, you'll need to talk to her old PR firm. They walked away for a reason. Now, keep in mind, Piers Morgan is many things. Loud, brash, opinionated. But he's not stupid. He didn't run with these tips blindly. He fact-checked. He cross-examined. He triangulated stories with sources who didn't even know each other. And what he found? Patterns. Inconsistencies. Gaps. Take the infamous skin color comment, for example. Meghan told Oprah that there were concerns raised about Archie's potential skin tone. A vile implication. Oprah was visibly shocked. The world was outraged. But Meghan never gave a name. She never gave a date. And when Harry was later pressed on it, his account was vaguer. It was awkward, he said. Uncomfortable. But behind the scenes, palace staff were dumbfounded. Some had been present for casual conversations about whose genes the baby might inherit. Height, hair color, eye shape, even freckles. But race? According to one senior aide, it never happened. Not like that. Piers heard this from one source. Then 2. Then 5. Different departments. Different roles. None coordinated. All repeating the same message. It was taken out of context. It didn't go down that way. She weaponized a casual remark. So, Piers started keeping a file. Meticulously organized. Dates. Names. Quotes. And slowly, the picture began to form. One he couldn't ignore, and certainly couldn't unsee. But if he was going to go public, he needed more. Something undeniable. That's when the sender finally revealed themselves. Not a royal. Not a journalist. But a former staffer at a high-level UK public relations firm that had once represented Meghan before she cut ties, right before the Oprah interview. Their claim? Meghan's team had drafted a narrative matrix in the months leading up to the interview, identifying key talking points that would maximize audience sympathy, highlight systemic trauma, and avoid direct accusations while inviting public speculation. It was a script, and racism was the centerpiece.